You aren't just a carpenter. You aren't just labor for this business, like you are the business. If you start treating your time like a valuable asset, you will understand that it costs money to have you on a project. So you don't need to necessarily work more hours to make more money. You might be able to work less hours. So if you pull yourself off the tools for whatever time's necessary, you might be able to create these efficiencies within your business, understand your numbers, market yourself to better clients, generate better leads, reduce bookkeeping errors and omissions, track your budget throughout the life cycle of that job, especially during and closing it out. You might be able to actually put less work in place, but your margins go up, right? Or you could put more work into place once you develop these systems, and it's costing you less money to put the work in place. You're actually making more money. You cannot be selling your time at this as the same cost as anyone who's working as an employee for your business. And if you are, then you need to be capturing an additional cost for whatever it takes to run that business. And maybe that's overhead. It depends on how you're structured. If you have separate line items for that, if you're big enough that you're cost plus, if you're T&M, if you're fixed cost, maybe it's a line item, right? So, oh yeah, for optics, I can say I'm $75 an hour, but I'm capturing all of these costs in separate line items for the project based on percentage of the sales revenue, based on the amount of time that we're managing the project. It all depends, but if you're going to maintain that same labor rate for an optics perspective, that needs to be accounted for elsewhere in your budget. You aren't just a carpenter. You aren't just labor for this business, like you are the business. You're responsible for the sales. You're responsible for the marketing. You're responsible for the risk, the liability, keeping the lights on, and that needs to be accounted for. It needs to be reflected in what you're being paid, and it cannot come at a concession to you, your lifestyle, your business. If you start treating your time like a valuable asset, you will understand that it costs money to have you on a project, that you bring immense value to jobs, and you will have an easier time charging those elevated or premium-based rates for your time. What you can also do is you can start auditing how you're spending your time, what you're spending your time on, where you can economize your time or where you can pull back, like I said, to be spending it on tasks that are better suited to growing the business. Again, I think a lot of people could probably pull back from what they're doing in the field and create a better, more sustainable, more profitable, more streamlined business model, actually sell less hours at the end of the year and make more money from a profit margin perspective. That's how I build my business. That just creates the lifestyle that I need. That's how I become excited about business, right? It's not necessarily looking to grow. How can I put the same amount of work in place as the last year without complicating my life or having the need to restructure or sell a bunch more work? How can I put the same amount of work in place from a numbers perspective, from a sales volume perspective, from a revenue perspective, but my cost associated with that producing that amount of work go down? And that could be cost financially, it'd be cost from a time investment. You're just creating efficiencies, you're reducing your overhead, and you're further creating the disparity between cost of goods sold and what your overhead is, or what the cost or the resources that's required to put that work in place. To me, that's really exciting. I think it's super interesting. You're not depending on a market to create those margins or better your margins. That's all stuff that you can do on your own to just create a more profitable, sustainable business where it's not like, hey, I need to bring in 3 more employees because these are the numbers that I need to hit. It's like, well, maybe we could get rid of an employee and we could systemize this, or we could bring in some software, or we could bring in some machinery, something that creates more efficiency with less input, less mistakes, and at the end of the day, a lower overhead. So these are all reasons why, as a business owner, you should focus on opportunity cost. You should focus on the value that you're bringing, the cost associated with you and your business, and what it costs to have you on a job, and that you are just not another labor rate that's going into this job, and why that will end up costing you a lot of money, a lot of headache, and a lot of frustration in the long run.